Jerusalem fell in 1099. To medieval Europe, it felt like destiny fulfilled, a holy city reclaimed, a divine promise proven true. Church bells rang across Christendom, chroniclers rushed to record the miracle. Sermons declared that history itself had bent to God's will. For a brief moment, certainty ruled the world. God, it seemed, had chosen a side. What almost no one noticed was that the victory had already broken the system meant to hold it. Because while Jerusalem was captured, something far more important was never secured: control. Not of the city itself, but of everything between cities, the land no banner truly owned. The roads, the movement, the invisible system that holds power together long after the cheering stops. The Crusades did not fail when Jerusalem fell decades later. They failed the moment victory exposed a truth no one wanted to face. Winning a holy war is not the same thing as ruling a world. The First Crusade was never imagined as chaos. It was imagined as restoration. Europe believed that reclaiming Jerusalem would stabilize the Christian world. That sacred geography would anchor political authority. That faith, once victorious, would naturally impose order. On paper, the logic made sense. Take the city, hold the shrines, install rulers, defend the walls. That was how kingdoms worked in Europe. Land meant authority, castles meant control, borders meant power. But the Eastern Mediterranean was not Europe. It was layered, fragmented, and contested by overlapping loyalties that had existed long before the Crusaders arrived. Languages, religions, and power centers collided in ways no single crown had ever fully mastered. The Crusaders captured Jerusalem, but they inherited a landscape that refused to behave like a kingdom. And the cracks appeared almost immediately. The armies that took Jerusalem did not stay. Feudal levies had fulfilled their vows. Knights returned home to estates waiting months away. Command structures dissolved nearly as fast as they had formed. What remained were thinly stretched rulers presiding over isolated strongholds, surrounded by territory they did not truly govern. Jerusalem became a Christian city surrounded by uncertainty. Control existed in points, not in between. And roads were the first thing to collapse. Pilgrims arrived in waves, inspired by victory. They came believing the Holy Land was now safe, but they traveled through territory no single authority controlled. Bandits thrived in the gaps, rival factions shifted allegiances overnight, treaties dissolved beyond the horizon, alliances meant little beyond the next hill, castles could defend positions, they could not defend movement, and movement was everything. Because power does not live in cities alone, it lives in what connects them. This is where most Crusade stories lose focus. They return to battles, sieges, and dates carved into stone. But the real crisis was quieter, slower, and far more dangerous. It unfolded at dawn on empty roads, in supply caravans that never arrived, in pilgrims who vanished between fortified towns. And this is where the entire crusade begins to fail. The Crusader states faced a problem no sermon could solve. They had territory, but not continuity. Victory, but not infrastructure. Authority, but not reach. Temporary armies could not patrol permanently. Kings could not be everywhere at once. Local lords competed instead of coordinating. Every journey became a gamble. And pilgrimage, the spiritual engine of the Crusades, became the system's greatest stress test. When pilgrims could not move safely, legitimacy began to rot. The Crusades had created a holy land that could not function. The failure was not dramatic. There was no single collapse. No announcement that the system was broken. Instead, it failed the way systems usually do. Quietly. Each year, fewer pilgrims returned home. Each season, fewer caravans arrived on time. Each campaign required more money, more men, more promises, and delivered less certainty in return. The Holy Land remained sacred, but it became unreliable, and unreliability is poison to power. Rulers could not plan, merchants could not trust routes, church authorities could not guarantee safety without sounding hollow. Every unanswered disappearance weakened the story of divine order. Every lost convoy made victory feel conditional. What the Crusades had created was not chaos, but something more dangerous: a permanent emergency, an environment where everything required force, but nothing could be stabilized long enough for force to matter. This is the moment where the old tools failed completely. Feudal loyalty was temporary. Armies dissolved when vows ended. Kings ruled in theory, but not in motion. And motion was the problem, because power that cannot move cannot enforce itself, and authority that cannot travel becomes symbolic. The Crusades had proven something no one intended to prove. That conquest without continuity produces systems that must either evolve or be replaced. And evolution does not wait for permission. Something had to adapt. History often credits adaptation to visionaries. In reality, adaptation belongs to necessity. The solution did not come from thrones, it came from structure. A new idea emerged quietly, almost accidentally. What if protection did not dissolve when armies went home? What if discipline did not depend on feudal loyalty? What if authority crossed borders instead of obeying them? This was not a religious revelation, it was a logistical one. Permanent force, permanent discipline, permanent presence, an institution designed not to conquer land, but to survive instability, not a kingdom, not an army raised and dismissed, something else entirely. This was the environment that gave rise to the military orders, and among them, one would matter more than all the others. The Knights Templar did not begin as legends, they began as a response to roads no one could secure, to pilgrims no one could protect, to a system collapsing under the weight of its own victory. They were small, disciplined, and permanent. They answered to no local ruler, they crossed borders freely, they operated where crowns could not. At first, no one realized what had been created. Their power was not in numbers, it was in obedience. Standardized rules, internal law, unbroken continuity. They moved men, money, and information across a fragmented world. Slowly, something dangerous took shape. The Crusades had created an institution that did not need territory to function. Power detached itself from land. At first, this autonomy was tolerated, even welcomed. The Templars solved problems no one else could. They stabilized routes, protected movement, handled logistics at scale. Kings trusted them, popes empowered them, but institutions that operate beyond borders do not remain invisible forever. As monarchies in Europe centralized, the contradiction became impossible to ignore. Here was an armed, wealthy, disciplined organization operating inside every kingdom, yet owned by none of them. They could not be taxed, they could not be commanded, they could not be easily removed. And that was the moment admiration turned into fear. What began as a solution became a liability, not because the Templars changed, but because the world around them did. The Crusades had ended, but the machine they created survived, and when the Crusader states finally collapsed, the real danger was not defeat. It was survival. An institution without a mission is far more threatening than one at war. The Templars outlived the battlefield that justified them. History does not forgive systems that outlast their explanation. What followed was not a military confrontation. It was legal, administrative, procedural, because the same system that created autonomous power now needed to dismantle it without admitting it had ever lost control. The Crusades are often remembered as a clash of civilizations, but their true legacy is more unsettling. They revealed a truth that still governs the world. Victory can create forces more dangerous than defeat. Systems born to solve emergencies rarely disappear when the emergency ends, and power, once detached from territory, does not willingly return to kings. The Crusades did not fail when Jerusalem fell. They failed when authority stopped depending on borders. And what rose from that failure would shape centuries of institutional fear, suppression, and silence. That story does not begin with fire. It begins with roads. And it does not end with defeat. It ends with erasure.